like Thomas said, I'm a professional speaker, and a lot of times people say, are you a motivational speaker? And that's a category that people have. And there's a lot of bad advice out there that you get from motivational speakers. And one of them comes from a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt said, do what you have with what you can where you are, right? Do what you can with what you have where you are. And that sounds good, and he's trying to motivate you to do the best you can in any situation. But what I want to show you today is why sometimes the way to do your best and to help other people to do the best is actually to leave the situation that you're in, to not try to make that situation better. And so I want to do that by explaining to you what three characters have in common. The first one is Superman, the second one is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and the third one is Michael Jordan. And if we can understand what these three people have in common, we can understand the power of situations to determine our success. So the first one is Superman. Superman is super. And the reason he is super is because he can see through walls, he is bulletproof, he can fly, all very, very good things. And one of the reasons actually people don't like Superman as much as they like other characters is because Superman really doesn't have any real weaknesses. He kind of do whatever he wants, wherever he wants. He's not like Batman or things like that. He's incredible. And but he does have one weakness. Who can tell me what Superman's one weakness is? Kryptonite, right? But here's what I think a lot of people don't understand, and even if you do understand it, I want to explain it, and I think a lot of people haven't really thought it through that much. Superman is only super when Superman is on Earth, right? Superman's weakness is kryptonite. Where does kryptonite come from? It comes from Krypton. What is Krypton? Krypton is the planet where Superman was born. If Superman would have stayed on the planet where he was born, Superman would not be super. Right? Superman is only super when he's on Earth, and on Earth the sun's rays give him his incredible power, and if he gets close to that kryptonite, then he begins to go back to be a regular person, right? A regular person. So even one of the most superheroes out there, right, has a weakness, and that weakness is being in the place or being exposed to the place where he was from, right? Superman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Okay, it's just moving on its own here. Superman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Michael Jordan, right? So we talked about Superman. We talked about kryptonite. So Superman is only super when he's on Earth. The place matters more than the person, right? The place matters more than the person. I was doing a presentation in Australia, and by the way, give it up for Vienna, right? Give it up for Vienna. She's been practicing that Australian accent so hard, right? She was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to sound Australian the whole time, and she did. I think she nailed it. But I was in Australia, and I was doing a presentation, and I talk about a lot of things you've heard so far, that what makes us weird makes us wonderful and all this stuff. And I was off in this town in Western Australia, really far away from any of the big cities, and this guy came up to me after the presentation. He said, Dave, I loved your talk, but I don't think weird is wonderful because I'm this weird, unusual kid in this town of hardworking miners and factory workers and things like that, and nobody accepts me for who I am, and you're telling me that weird is wonderful, but it doesn't feel very wonderful, and nobody likes me, and nobody accepts me. And he said, one of the things I'm really into is fashion. And I said, okay. I said, what's the fashion capital of Australia? And he said, well, depending on who you talk to, it's Melbourne or Sydney. And I said, if you went there, would you be a gigantic weirdo? And he said, no, right? And I said, the problem right now isn't who you are, it's what? It's where you are, right? But a lot of times people say, do what you can with what you have where you are, and that last piece is the mistake. So we all know the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer story. How many of you have seen it in claymation? How many of you have seen it in claymation, right? So we're just going to go through the song, right? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had a very shiny nose. Now I know Rudolph wasn't real. We have some younger people here. I hope that's not a spoiler, but Rudolph isn't real. But reindeer are real, right? And reindeer don't have bright red noses, right? So Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it close, right? So what happened? All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. The reason we're concerned with being weird, with being unusual, with being different is because we're worried that we're going to be rejected, right? We're going to be rejected and we're going to be isolated, and we want to be accepted and we want to be appreciated, right? I lost a little respect for Santa during that. Even he didn't accept Rudolph. And so I thought that was frustrating. His parents, if you remember, they put some dirt over his nose to try to cover it up and hide it. His parents didn't accept him. When he tried to hang out with that other girl reindeer, the dad got all upset. Then my daughter started crying at that part, and we couldn't watch the rest of it. So all of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. Then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, "Rudolph, with your nose so bright," sounds like a positive adjective, doesn't it, right? Everything changed. Rudolph, with your nose so bright. Now he's not weird. Now he's not bad. Now he's not ostracized. Now he's fantastic, because what just happened? Then one foggy Christmas Eve, when the situation changed, everyone's perception of Rudolph changed. The situation is all that changed. Rudolph was the same, except now what was weird became valuable because he was in a new situation. "Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?" Then all the reindeer loved him. Wait a second, right? We go from isolated and rejected to love. All the other reindeer loved him, and they shouted out with glee, "Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, you'll go down in history." The ones that go down in history aren't just unusual, right? They're the ones who find the situation that maximizes the value that they can provide, and that doesn't fit with do what you can with what you have where you are. It's actually crucial to find the right situation. So what does that have to do with Michael Jordan? Well, can anybody tell me, especially based on this picture, what does Rudolph, Superman, and Michael Jordan have in common? They can all fly, right? They can all fly. Someone else said red. That also is true, but not relevant to this discussion, right? So Michael Jordan is amazing. There's younger people in the room. You probably weren't around for him playing, but you're wearing his shoes, right? You're wearing his shoes. You're wearing his logo. You've heard of Michael Jordan, and if you haven't, you've seen this silhouette on clothing and on shoes that you buy and spend a lot of money for. So Michael Jordan was very good at basketball. He won 6 rings, 6 world championships as a basketball player, which caused some people to say, is Michael Jordan the greatest athlete of all time? And that is a stupid question, because he is not the greatest athlete of all time. He is maybe, if you want to argue, the greatest basketball player of all time. And we know this for an absolute fact, because in between the first 3 championships and the second 3 championships, Michael Jordan decided that he was going to play baseball. Okay? And as you can see from this Sports Illustrated cover, Michael Jordan was terrible at baseball. Michael Jordan wasn't the greatest athlete of all time. Michael Jordan was maybe one of the best basketball players of all time. Athletics is not one skill. He had the ability to be very, very good, be one of the best ever at one of the sports, but he wasn't even good at one of the other sports, right? And it keeps going, because Michael Jordan's bad at a lot of things, right? Michael Jordan then bought the Charlotte Hornets, which then became the Charlotte Bobcats, and then became the Charlotte Hornets again. And they have consistently, under his ownership, been the absolute worst basketball team in all of the NBA. And I know that because I live in North Carolina, and we're forced to deal with this. Okay? Michael Jordan was very good at one thing. He was good at basketball, and if Michael Jordan is not on the basketball court, he's below average at most of the other things. He's got a gambling habit. He's bad at interpersonal skills. He alienated just about everyone on earth during his Hall of Fame speech. Michael Jordan, you could argue, isn't even a good person. He was just a very good basketball player. Do you see where I'm coming from, right? But sometimes we give these people what's called a halo effect, where when someone's successful, we say that is a good person or that is a successful person. It's not true. It's not the person. It's the connection between who they are and where they are. So let's move on to something that's maybe more applicable today, because you're like, hey, Rudolph isn't real and Superman isn't real. But Joe Whale is real. And Joe Whale was this kid in England, and he was in class one day, and he likes to doodle. You can see his doodles behind him there. He doesn't just scribble, he doodles, and he's really artistic about it, and he spends a lot of time on it, and he doesn't just do the same kind of things over and over. He's very, very creative. And one of his teachers came up to Joe and said, you got to stop that. I'm teaching math class, and you need to learn math, and you need to focus on math, and you need to get a good grade in math, and you need to be a good person, and good people are good students, and they get good grades in school, and then they succeed in school, and then they go to a good college, and then they get a good job, and that's how you become a good person. Fortunately, Joe had another teacher. And the other teacher said, Joe, those doodles are really cool. And she set Joe up with an Instagram account, which doesn't flash like this. His is different. It's a different kind. We'll move to the next one and see if that saves you from the attack. So she set up an Instagram account for him, and people started seeing Joe's art, and they really liked Joe's art. And a local restaurant approached Joe and said, hey, Joe, what we'd like to do is hire you to draw on our walls. And so they painted all of their walls white. You can go ahead and just shut it off if you want. They painted all of their walls white and told him that he could draw doodles in the entire restaurant. Right? He could draw doodles throughout the entire restaurant. And he became relatively famous for that. He also got paid for that, and now he's a middle schooler who, instead of getting good grades in math, is making money, which is the goal. And so people found out about him doodling at the restaurant, and then some people approached him and asked him if he would want to do an art show, which is also the goal when you're an artist. So he did a gallery show, and people came and bought his art. And then somebody came along and said, would you like to do your own coloring book, which is actually perfect for doodles because they're black and white, and you can color them in. And then he became an illustrator for a book. I love the title of this one, Game of Scones. That's very clever. I think that was well done. So now he's getting paid to illustrate books. But then it keeps going, because then Nike came along and said, hey, Joe, would you like to design Nike shoes? Right? And he said, yes, I would. And so now you can buy Joe Whale Doodle Boy Nike shoes. I'm going to try that last slide again for a second, because it does tie it in a beautiful way that I planned. If you notice, he's wearing an Air Jordan shirt. Okay, so we tried hard, but it didn't happen. So now, so why was Joe successful? Joe is not successful in school. In fact, he was phenomenally unsuccessful at school, to the point where the people at school were telling him that there was something wrong with him and he needed to fix it. And then somebody else said, no, Joe, don't worry about school. Let's focus on art, and let's move you into situations like gallery shows. I also saw, and we couldn't see it because of the flash, but if you notice on his Instagram page, he's also done a collaboration with the Prince and Princess of Wales. He's doing okay, right? Joe's hanging in there, and he's managing to have more success than the teacher who told him that he wasn't doing it very well. Right? But he's only successful because one person helped him find the situation that put the spotlight on where he was going to be successful. Does that make sense, right? It isn't who he is, it's the combination of who he is and where he is. So there's another version of do what you can with what you have where you are, and it's called bloom where you planted, and this is especially stupid because it doesn't even work for plants, right? Analogies are at least supposed to make sense for the thing that they apply to, but also for then what you're applying it to. But plants don't bloom where they're planted, do they? Right? In fact, some of you, some of you have had experience with this, your plants don't bloom ever at all, and no matter what you do to them. They only bloomed when you bought them, and then it's been a downhill slide to death ever since, right? But this is a stupid thing. If you go to the store and you buy a plant, it's going to have a tag on it, and the tag's going to say this likes low acidity soil, it likes lots of water, it likes medium sun and some shade. And if you don't give it those 4 things, what does it do? You don't get to go bloom where you plant it. It doesn't matter, right? And if I take a desert plant and I move it to the Arctic, what's going to happen? It's going to die. And if I take an Arctic plant and I move it to the desert, what's it going to do? It's going to die, right? You can't bloom where you're planted any more than plants can bloom where they're planted. What you have to do is put yourself in situations where you're likely to bloom. And one of the things that I think we need to do if we're going to help other people is sometimes we think we're helping them by motivating them and inspiring them with quotes like, do what you can with what you have where you are, right? I asked him to do a timer for me. I appreciate that. So I know it's just about over. Instead of do what you can with what you have where you are, what we need to do is give people permission to uproot themselves. And sometimes what we need to do is actually be the person who says, hey, this isn't working out for you right now, but what if you were to move yourself to this kind of a situation, right? What if you were to move yourself somewhere else? Did you know that people like you do very well in places like this? So I'll give you one last example before I walk away. I didn't choose this initially. I just wanted a picture of someplace cold. But if you notice, if you look closely, there's little penguins. Have you ever seen a penguin walk? Penguins are terrible walkers. They look ridiculous, they're slow, they're terrible at walking. And you've probably seen them walking because you've seen Morgan Freeman talking about them walking, right? Have you ever seen a penguin swim? It's the most graceful and majestic thing you've ever seen in your entire life. And what I think is that some of us are penguins, and we're walking around looking like idiots, and the people around us are trying to encourage us and telling us to walk faster or walk harder or walk in a different direction, when what we need to do is find the water. Thank you very much.